Hello everyone, welcome to Stars of the Diamond, and my name is Rhett Yakeley, and today we are going to be talking about one of my favorite sets of all time, the 1911 Zeenut set. Now, Zeenut's kind of a weird name. So in 1911, the Collins Candy Company in San Francisco started producing a set of cards of the Pacific Coast League players, so California, for the most part, and Portland, places like that, were part of the Pacific Coast League. And in their products called Home Run Kisses, Roughneck, and Zeenut, which is like a popcorn confection, think Cracker Jack, they would produce one of these cards in each package. Now, the cards themselves are quite nice looking, and they measure, I think, about 2 1/8 by about 4 inches, so pretty sizable cards. And they have this sepia tint to them, and just in general, one of, I think, the most beautiful sets ever made. Now, I'm going to kind of go through a couple different aspects of it. There are 122 different players in this set, okay, of which 121 are obtainable. Okay, there's a 122nd player named Leo Bowen, who is a notorious rarity, only a couple known to exist of that card. And for the completist, that's the card that's going to kind of get in the way. Now, there are cards in this set that are just as rare as that Bowen card, but they fall under the lines of a variation, and so they're not necessarily collected as much as that particular card because it's a single card. So you can collect it in different ways. And I collect every card. If I can get my hands on variations, things like that, I will. So for example, here's an example of a variation player. You can kind of see his body is, 2 different sizes here. And this is the common version. This one is incredibly rare. So I'll go over some variations that I have. I don't have all the variations. And again, for my kind of player set, I have 121 of the 122 cards. Now, the most famous player in this set would likely be our friend Buck Weaver. And he is known, in baseball, in the baseball world, as being one of the Black Sox. And so as far as kind of price goes, barring rarity, he's the card that's going to set you back the most money, okay? And so he was one of those 8 guys, again, that got kicked out of baseball for life. So first thing I'm going to go over is just some of the more prominent players. I will go over some of the variations, and then at the end, I'm going to kind of tell you who I feel like, aside from Bowen, are the hardest cards to find in this set. Okay, so Buck Weaver, probably arguably the best card in the set as far as kind of players go. Another prominent player in and of himself is Roget Peckinpaugh. And Peckinpaugh would go on to have a long major league career and be the coach, manager, things like that within the major leagues as well. There's other guys, Tom Sheehan, Ossie Vitt, and a bunch of other players just like that did have long careers that were, kind of found here. Now, of the players that are in this, keep in mind that in the Pacific Coast League, they really didn't view themselves as necessarily a minor league like we think of them now. Major League Baseball ended, as far as kind of its westward expansion at this time, ended in Chicago, St. Louis. So nothing west of Chicago, St. Louis was part of Major League Baseball. So think heyday Hollywood, Los Angeles in the teens, 20s, 30s. These were their athletes that they hobnobbed with, that they kind of hung out with, and obviously amazing weather, everything like that. So a lot of these players really didn't view themselves as necessarily being minor league as we would kind of think of them today. And so next I'm going to kind of go into some cards that sort of stray from sort of the normal look to them and tend to be extremely popular for that reason. And first I'm going to kind of go with, most cards in this set kind of have this look where they're sort of full body shots. And so we have kind of one card that it's never really sold for a whole heck of a lot more than some of the other cards, but I've always really liked the image on this Harkness card, just because of the picture. I just think it's a beautiful card. and one that, you know, if you were to squirrel away a 1911 Zeenut for a type collection or something like that, I think this is a nice example because it's not a hard card to find necessarily, but it's just a beautiful card. And in addition to that, we have, again, a few cards that sort of stray from the norm. So again, these cards almost always have the Zeenut Series, Pacific Coast League, last name of the player, and then their team, kind of just in the way that we see them there. But there were two cards that were issued with their names in boxes. And so they've always been kind of popular and sell for quite a bit because of the difference in the way that they look. And of those two, we have Buddy Ryan, who's in the Pacific Coast League Hall of Fame, and Tom Seaton. And Tom Seaton's interesting because in the 1920 version of the Black Sox scandal that kind of went through the Pacific Coast League, Seaton was actually banned from baseball for life at that point. But as you can kind of see, as opposed to a regular card, you have these two that just have a completely different look to them. And they've kind of remained popular for that reason. And I'll kind of come back to these because some of them are actually some pretty good rarities as well. Now the Ryan one is a good segue into the variations in this set. So there are 21, I believe, different cards in this set that can be found with variations. And the Ryan is a prominent one because, as you can see, he was made in two versions, one with the box and one without. And the one without tends to sell for, you know, kind of roughly what a, you know, Zeenut card from 1911 sells for, of a fairly popular player, whereas the one with the box sells for multiples of that. And I hate to say values of things just because by the time someone watches this, maybe years from now, the values may be obsolete. But at the current time that I'm recording this, an average 1911 Zeenut card will probably run you $40, $50 on the low end to about $100 for a presentable copy. Obviously higher for a high grade card, but you shouldn't have a hard time finding an example in that price range. Now, arguably, apart from rarities and, you know, the such, arguably the most popular card in this set is one of kind of a nobody. His name was John Halla, and it's distinct in that it's the only card in this set that comes not vertical but horizontal. And it is also viewed by many in that collect vintage cards to be one of the most aesthetically pleasing cards that was ever produced. And so that's this card right here. Just the pose, everything about this card is, you know, in reality, just kind of beautiful. And so it's become really, really popular. And while if this player had been found on just a regular vertical card like this, he would be in the common range. This card of that player, John Halla, tends to sell for, you know, 10, 20 times what an average card would sell for at the minimum. And they are quite hard to find now, even though in terms of absolute rarity, they're not one of the rarest cards in the set. But it will set you back quite a bit of money for this John Halla card, just because of how it looks. So that's kind of going over the more prominent players and kind of the cooler poses, I would say. So let's get into the variations, okay? And the variations are interesting, and there are very few collections that have a large number of the variations in them. And most people that collect this set are not crazy enough to go after the variations. They're just not. So, and not all variations have extremely rare versions, but most of them do. And I'll kind of point out which ones are the ones that kind of have those rare variations versus ones that are just moderately difficult. So I showed you the Burt Delmas before. And again, this is our common. This is our extreme rarity. And this is definitely one of those cards that is quite rare. And I'm going to pick up these. So this is my entire collection here. So that goes into the common and an extreme rarity. The next one is pretty interesting in that this is actually a correction. So to a lot of people, this constitutes a 123rd card in the set because it wasn't simply just a variation, although obviously with the size of the player presented here, that is a distinct variation. But we can kind of see which one came first, because over here, this person's name is actually spelled Discoll, Discoll, and his last name was actually Driscoll. And so they would go on to correct that name and issue a corrected card. Now, this is not one of those cards that is an extreme rarity. They're difficult. Obviously, it's difficult, or I would have a nicer example than what I have right here. But not one of those cards that's, you know, if you see it, buy it type of thing. Like, you might be able to kind of select the one that you want there. Now, here's also another one. And again, take a look at not necessarily the size of the player, because the size of the player on those two is pretty equal. However, obviously the name placement is on the opposite side of the body of this player. And this is the common version that you'll find, a common card. And this one over on this side with the large name is an extremely rare card. And again, most people would not necessarily be looking for this particular card for their set, just because why pay, you know, multiples of which you can just kind of find with this one card. So again, cool. I collect them this way. If I ever see a variation, I will pick it up. If you have some that I don't have, I would love to pick them up. Okay, but that's a variation. And again, these variations in 1911 can be extremely hard to find. This is another one, and this is a player, and I haven't talked about it yet, but some players can actually be found with 3 versions. And Alex Arlett, actually the older brother of Buzz Arlett, the Pacific Coast League, you know, superstar. This was his older brother who was a pitcher. This is one of those that can be actually found in 3 versions. And this is our common version. And I say common in quotations because he's actually a really hard card to find in any version, Arlett is. But this card right here with that name being large like that is an extremely rare variation. So again, hard card to find. Next one, another one that's extremely rare, is Moore for Los Angeles. And again, obvious differences between these two. And this one that I have over here that's graded by SGC is the common version, and more large name over here, and a larger body as well. You can kind of see that. The large name over here, this is the rare version. And so some of these variations are literally as rare as the Bowen card. They're just not going to get the attention that card gets. Because again, even if you're just trying to get one of each player, you're gonna need the Bowen. And here's one, Win Noise. And you can see the extreme difference in size, typography, everything like that, type font, everything. And again, same player, similar pose, different look to the cards, and that's Win Noise. And this is not a card that's necessarily a super rarity. So this is a variation that you might be able to kind of locate. And again, both moderately difficult on the noise versions, but you know, not to the same degree. And here we've got Holland for San Francisco. And again, small version, large version. And there's not necessarily a rhyme or reason. Sometimes the larger version is the rarer one, sometimes the smaller one is. These two as well, not extremely rare necessarily relative to the ones in this stack over here. So again, 2 different, same picture. And I apologize for the glare. There's a lot of glare off of these graded cards. And again, not necessarily a supreme rarity like some of the other variations on Holland. And then that brings us to the last variation that I have present, and I don't claim to have all of them, and that's Heaney Heitmuller. And Heaney Heitmuller, pretty cool player in baseball history, actually. He won the 1912 Pacific Coast League batting title, but he won that title posthumously because he actually died in 1912 during the season. I can't remember what it was, but I think it was typhoid or something like that. But he passed away the year after these cards were made. He had played for the the Athletics. He actually has a card in, I think, the E90-1 American Caramel set for the A's. But by this time, he was playing in Los Angeles and won the 1912 batting title posthumously. But again, you can kind of see large version here and small version. And Heitmuller is actually a pretty rare card in either version. So he's one of the cards that you're going to find that's quite difficult. Okay. And then in addition, we already talked about the other variation that I have, and that's the Ryan for Portland. And the name in boxes is the harder one to find and the more popular one, just because of the distinctive look. But that card, even with that distinctive look, while it might cost more, is not necessarily, you know, a supreme rarity in and of itself. Okay. So hopefully that's clear too. I know it's a lot of information. Feel free to pause and go back to it. So now I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about just who I feel like are the toughest cards in this set. Now, the number one card in the set is Bowen. I don't have that card. I can't show it to you, but if one were to come up at auction, it would be a pretty extreme price that you would see with that card. Now, I'm going to kind of go through a couple. There's some that I'm going to give sort of honorable mention to, and some of those are the Zeenut card that we kind of talked about already. The name in the boxes just doesn't come up for sale often, and when it does, it fetches a pretty good price. A, because of rarity, and B, because of the distinct look to it. And the reality is that I've noticed that card, the picture version of itself, is actually much larger than the other cards, and it's almost oversized compared to every other Zeenut card from 1911 I've ever seen. And it's just always that way. You can kind of see side by side how much larger that photo portion is than an average card, and just the way that card kind of always is. Some other honorable mention cards, in my opinion, are this guy right here. And it's kind of interesting because he is found in a variation, and this is the extreme rare variation, not the common version. And for whatever reason, I just haven't found a Stinson in the common version with the more typical name size and everything that I was comfortable paying what the person was asking for it. So the one that's in my set is this extremely rare variation, of which there's only a couple known to exist, and it just kind of happens that way. But not necessarily this exact one, same picture, but the regular version of him definitely is an honorable mention in the rare cards. And if he wasn't, I would have another example of him. And another card that I would say would be in the honorable mention category is Smith for San Francisco. Just and again, these are all just my personal opinion, what I have found. There's, you know, in a lot of these, I have looked at a lot of cards, thousands of cards over the years, so I guess there's some degree of scientific, you know, study here. But again, these are my experience with this set, putting it together, what I've seen, cards that I've been able to upgrade, that haven't been able to, things like that. And so Smith for San Francisco. There is a Smith for Los Angeles, who's a fairly common player to find. Cool catching pose on Smith for Los Angeles. But Smith for San Francisco definitely deserves an honorable mention in the tough category. And kind of the final one I think that I'm going to put in the honorable mention is McCune for Portland. And he's another guy that can be found in, I think, actually 3 different versions of him. And, you know, to varying degrees. I think one is only half of his body, the other is this, and then there's another one in addition to that. But again, just finding any example of McCune he's a tougher guy to find. And it's kind of going on, I think some people that we have already spoken about are, I don't know that I have him out here, but Smith San Francisco as well. I think I just forgot to get him out. He's a tough one to find. Smith San Francisco. But we did talk about the Heitmuller. again, pretty darn hard card to find in any version, Okay, so most people going for this set kind of find the one that they can find in the nicest shape. I feel like the small one is hard to find in good shape, which is why I have this kind of beater right now. But again, this is the third, probably the third example of that card that I've had that I've just kind of slowly upgraded. So this is the nicer one. And another kind of, well, we already talked about him as well, but Arlet in any style, any size is a very hard card to find. Okay. And so that kind of brings us to maybe our top 6 or so cards that I kind of wanted to talk about. And one of them I'm going to start off with is not necessarily a true rarity in absolute numbers that exist, but he's an extremely hard card to find because there's literally a family member that buys every single copy. And so Miller for San Francisco will be one of the hardest cards to find because anytime there is one that comes up for sale, I guess it's a bit of a hoarder. I hate saying that because it's a family member and, you know, they're free to do so. But there is somebody that buys every example of Bullet Miller that comes up for sale because that's a family member. So if you have a chance to find a Miller, pick it up in any condition because I don't know when the next one's going to come up that doesn't get tucked away into that collection. But again, not necessarily a rarity by absolute numbers. That he's probably medium rarity overall in the set, but that particular person I think has 40-50 copies of the card. Okay, which for a set like 1911 Zeenuts, that's a significant number of cards. And so kind of moving forward, it kind of brings us down to maybe the top 5 rarities, I would say, in the set. And again, these are just my opinions of who I feel like are the rarest guys. So next in rarity for me, I think would probably be Bill Lindsay for Portland. And again, just a card that I just don't, you just don't see it as much as a lot of the other 1911 Zeenuts when they come up for sale. Again, you tend to find, of the 122 cards, you tend to find about half this set fairly easily. The other half, the next 50 or so, pretty, you know, harder, but you start getting into some guys like Gleason and people like that that are harder to find for sure. But these guys that I'm talking about in the last few and the next few are distinctly harder to find. And Lindsay would definitely be one that's very, very difficult to find. Okay, so I would say I would probably put him at number 6. Now, number 5 in terms of, you know, the 5th hardest guy to find in the set, I would say probably would be this guy right here, last name File. And mine's kind of OC, but kind of a hard card to find. And again, this is my opinion. There are people that I think feel this is probably should be higher up on the list, but in my experience, he's probably the 5th hardest guy to find in the set. And next for me was always this card right here, and it's Henry Melchior for San Francisco. And again, just a hard card to find. I think this one might be a little bit of a surprise for some people that he's this hard to find. Kind of a cool pose, just ready in the infield here. And kind of the 3rd toughest one for me when I was putting my set together is Curtis Bernard. And again, this might be different, you know, than some other people's, you know, opinion of what the hardest card to find is. But he was a difficult one for me to find. This is a pretty nice example of this, and they do have blank backs. And they have kind of a texture, you know, to the card. You can kind of see that almost like a leather texture to the card, and that's natural to the card itself. And so they were made that way. And so they're, again, just a really almost luxuriously beautiful set of cards to collect. And so probably the 2nd hardest card to find that's obtainable and you know, findable, I suppose, is this card right here. And to me, Fullerton is distinctly the second hardest person to find in this set behind the Bowen. And again, I do not own a Bowen card, so I will not be showing that to you. But for me, and I think a lot of people that collect this set, this player with that distinctive kind of arms crossed, you know, over his chest was an extremely difficult card to find. And I've picked up every example that I've ever had of Fullerton and kind of distributed them back to other collectors that are going after the set, just because I know of the rarity of this particular card. So anyways, those are my thoughts about the 1911 Zeenut card. I would love any kind of comments that you might have in regards to this set. If you have differing opinions or anything like that, I totally welcome that. And I'd love to hear about it. Be sure to, you know, follow my page and subscribe to my videos. Life's gotten kind of crazy. I've been meaning to make a lot more videos, but this one, someone on that Net 54 forum that a lot of us vintage card collectors go on to was asking about this set and wasn't getting a lot of responses. So I figured the best way to respond to that was, hey, make a video. So again, my name is Rhett Yakeley. Stars of the Diamond is my YouTube page. Be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you get updates when I upload new videos. And thanks for spending some time with me and you know, learning about the 1911 Zeenut set, which I think is one of the most fun and obtainable, minus the one, sets that you could collect. And if you are a Pacific Coast League collector, this is the pinnacle of Pacific Coast League collecting. Thank you guys so much, and as always, happy collecting. Bye.